Honorable Maneesh Gobin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to start by setting the context in which we are, once again. Because in all the debate, what is happening, the people out want to understand what is happening. So it is important that we set the context, once again. Many, many orators have today, and many more will do so in the coming days, stress on the difficult situation in which the country is. We will all speak of unemployment, le coût de la vie, l'emploi, la cherté de la vie. We will all talk about the debt to GDP ratio. I say yes, we are in a difficult situation, and nobody on this side pretends that we are not in a difficult situation. Yes, our debt is high, but can somebody name me a country in the world, anywhere, where debt is not high and going even higher? Est-ce qu'il y a un pays, quelque part, comme ça? Est-ce qu'on est le seul pays à emprunter? Where debt to GDP is reaching record high. Yes, it is reaching record high, yes. But name me a country where it is not. Cost of living is going high, yes. Name me a country where it is not. So this is the context. When early 2020, we heard of the first case of COVID in the province of Wuhan in China. Nobody could predict what was going to unfold in the year 2020. And in the year 2020, apart from lockdowns, we had no other option. The only thing we could do was lockdown, and we did. We managed to contain, and then we managed to reopen later in 2020, and Mauritius had only its own domestic market to sustain its economy. Our tourist arrival reached a grinding and immediate halt. We could not import certain products for some time. Maritime lines had stopped, airlines had stopped flying. But then later, 2020, late towards 2020, the whole world saw a ray of hope. And that ray of hope came with the first vaccines. In 2021, therefore, when we start a vaccination campaign, as in many other countries, we do so with hope that there will be better days ahead. This is the context, not only here in Mauritius, but in any other country. Any other country is looking at better days ahead, and we are all cautiously optimistic. It is in this context that we say to the people of Mauritius that we should be together for better days ahead. And it is now that we need to reboot the economy. It's like rebooting your computer. You start again. And how do we reboot an economy? It is, of course, by public sector expenditure. If public sector expenditure if there is public expenditure, it is once again to reboot that economy, and this is what this budget is about. is to reboot in the hope that les économies de plusieurs pays vont repartir, that we will have once again access to our traditional markets, that tourism will pick up again, we will have arrivals, and with arrivals, the economy, especially in the tourism sector, will rebound. So, ça ne sert à rien de faire un blame game. We are in this country together, and we should work together to reboot our economy for the sake of our country and for the sake of our children. And in these difficult times, this government, as always, has never shied away from its responsibilities on the social justice front. We have not reduced in any way the allowances that are paid, whether it be pensions or to the vulnerable citizens. We have not. We have maintained everything as they are. But what we have done also is year on year we bring innovation despite difficult times. The House will recall year on year this government has brought innovation. My colleague Honorable Ariram mentioned it earlier. In the year 2016-2017, we heard of for the first time about the minimum wage. Year on year, we had such measures. After that, we heard of the negative income tax. And not to mention the pensions. And this year, there is a landmark announcement in the budget. And that landmark announcement, which I call a game changer, concerns the biomass framework. In our common language, in our common Creole language, bagasse means what it means. It means bagasse, quelque chose qui n'a pas de valeur. We bring a paradigm shift. Today, government announces that bagasse has a value. There had been debate about it for a number of years, but we take the courageous step of ascribing value to our bagasse. And it has multiplier effect. The more we use bagasse, the less we will import coal or HFO. And the less we import coal and HFO, the less we will spend on our foreign exchange. And bagasse is homegrown. If today it is bagasse, tomorrow it will be biomass. Yes, it will be. I heard earlier that nothing is mentioned about the biomass. It will move on incrementally, I can assure the House. Now it's bagasse, tomorrow it will be biomass. Number of reports have been, for instance, written on the other plant called the Arundu Nax, I think. There is still debate about it. There is no agreement up to now. But there are other plants where we will be able to use in the biomass framework. And with this landmark measure, all the captains of industry say now that yes, sugar has a future because of this additional 3,300 rupee per ton of sugar produced. This takes me, therefore, to this very important sector of our economy, which is the sugar sector. We have not reduced the 25,000 rupee for the first 60 tons of sugar produced. This is a subsidized price, yes, and it will continue to be so. Not only for the for the price of sugar, but government has also waived, as it is announced in this budget, the cess, which is payable under the MCI Act for 2021. Government also waives the premium payable to the SIFB. This is the situation of the sugar sector. Let me give some more details, therefore, on this sector. For the price of sugar, the House will appreciate, in April of this year, the Mauritius Sugar Syndicate has revised its estimate for the price of sugar payable to planters for crop 2020. It was estimated at 12,000, but actually reached 13,000 per ton of sugar, which represents an increase of 50% as compared to the lowest price recorded during the past 12 years. And we are expecting, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, a further increase in the price when it will be finalized around mid-July of this year. The situation is therefore encouraging when we compare the price of sugar for crops 2018 and 2019, which were respectively 8,686 and 11,384 per ton, respectively. So therefore, despite the difficult situation, government maintains all the assistance that it has provided, namely the guaranteed price of 25,000 per ton of sugar for the first 60 tons, and the advance on fertilizers provided to 7,500 planters, and the amount of money provided for under the cane replantation scheme so as to encourage planters to replant their abandoned fields. And this is, in addition, further funds were provided under the COVID-19 Projects Development Fund for the same purpose. Now, government, it is important to recall that in order to alleviate the problems of cooperatives during harvest, government had allocated 15 million rupees for the purchase of a harvester. That harvester, I'm pleased to announce, has already reached Mauritius and is being assembled to be used for the next, at least for the next harvest, but not in the immediate future, maybe towards a bit later on in the year. And this is happening under an MOU signed between the MCIA and the Mauritius Cooperative Agricultural Federation for the management of that harvester. We have faced, of course, a number of difficulties because of the fact that we are under lockdown and we could not bring the engineers from the manufacturer, but that has been delayed. He will be coming soon. We are putting through the centralized digital land bank of Landscope, land to be put for agricultural purposes. The House will also recall that government has provided money to pay for transport and associated costs for the sugarcane under the Medellin factory area. Why? Because we know that Medellin factory has closed and cane has to be transported to the other 3 millers. Government has also doubled all the efforts it has put under the Deputy Prime Minister's chairmanship to complete all the VRS, ERS and blueprint projects which have been delayed for more than 12 to 14 years. Earlier this year in February, we had remittance of title deeds for the VRS in Piton. Now we have the VRS in Bonne-Mère, which is ready. It's just a question of organizing a ceremony for remittance of title deeds. All these we are completing when in fact it ought to have been completed 14 years ago. Next one on the list for the VRS in the sugar sector would be at Bamboo, where 115 VRS beneficiaries from Medellin Sugar Factory will receive their title deeds. Government is also now, as announced in the budget, putting the necessary funding for the tea sector. A sector, as my good friend, now ambassador to Washington, Honorable Mine Joro, used to say, tea sector had been in the intensive care unit for a number of years, completely neglected. And here, once again, it is important to remind the House of the historic measure announced for the payment of a winter allowance to tea growers to cover for the winter period where there is no revenue at all to tea growers. And this year, the budget is announced, the Minister of Finance has announced also necessary funding for tea cooperatives to purchase a harvester. Now, this grant to purchase the harvester helps to alleviate the problem of labor shortage in the tea sector, so that growers, therefore, will not abandon their fields. And for those who think that the tea sector does not have a future, I would humbly invite them to read the recent report which was commissioned by my ministry and which was undertaken by the FAO to evaluate the economic sustainability of the tea sector. What comes out of that report is that the tea made in Mauritius has unique characteristic, which is pesticide-free, which means that it can fetch very high price indeed. What is important also to remind the House in the context in which we are, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, sir, is that COVID-19 pandemic has made us realize how vulnerable we are as a net food importing country. If we do not produce what we consume, and if we do not consume what we produce, that makes us dependent on imports. And government is leaving no stone unturned to fund the non-sugar sector as well for local production of fruits, of vegetables, and of meat. I say this in the context of the agro-processing project which is a national priority for government. We have seen for far too long, for far too many years, that when there is good production, when the harvest is good, we unfortunately see que les légumes frais, après seulement quelques jours, sont jetés. Why is this happening? Because we do not process our fresh products enough for conservation. Il faut éduquer nos producteurs et les small and medium enterprises that it does not require complicated machinery to do agro-processing. So what government is doing, therefore, is around the national wholesale market, which is situated at 5 Ways Wooton, a project which was initiated by my very able predecessor, Honorable Siratan, and which is nearing completion this year. What we build around the national wholesale market is an agro-processing zone. The vision of my ministry and the vision of this government is that the same way as we had the EPZ in the past, we can have our APZ which will make us secure in terms of our demands for food. And food security, therefore, comes very high on our agenda. Food sovereignty, if I may say, comes very high on our agenda. There are, like this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, a plethora of measures, and I prefer not to waste the time of the House going through it one by one. It is all set out in the annexes and in the estimates. What I want to drive at, the point I want to drive at, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, is that we are putting a lot of effort to reboot our economy, while at the same time supporting our citizens, the vulnerable groups, and we are supporting those in the production of fruits, vegetables, and our friends, the animal breeders. This takes me to the next point I want to address concerning breeding activity. Mr. Speaker, sir, in this budget, government is doubling the subsidy provided for animal feed. This may not sound as if, I mean to say 20 million rupees does not sound a lot of money compared to the billions you hear here and there. But what it means to that animal breeder means a lot, and I will explain why. And I will explain the story why this measure has been included in the budget. On a particular visit, field visit I had, I met with a few animal breeders, and in particular, one cooperative in the region of Maibu. I met a young gentleman who introduced himself as a young graduate. He explained to me that despite being a graduate, he did not stop with the family business he had with his brothers and his parents of breeding. He had une vingtaine, je crois, une vingtaine de vaches, if I recall correctly, and of course some other animals in his farm. That young graduate, that young gentleman made a passionate plea on that field visit, and his plea was that the 70% of their expenses as breeders go to purchase of animal feed, 70%. And his only request was for government to increase the subsidy for the purchase of animal feed. The purchase of animal feed works as follows. Whenever the breeder purchases animal feed, he gets until now, 4 rupees per kilogram of animal feed purchase. That is the subsidy which government pays out to the animal breeder. His plea was to increase it so that breeders could receive an assistance from government. And I took this request to my colleagues, and in particular to my colleague, the Minister of Finance. And what is happening in this budget? He has not merely increased the subsidy, but he has doubled that subsidy. It doesn't sound very shiny measure, but to that breeder, I say once again, it means a lot. And people out there follow what happens in this House, because on that day, when that measure was being announced by the Minister of Finance on Friday, within minutes I received an SMS on my phone from that gentleman saying, on behalf of all breeders, I want to thank you. This goes in line with our food security program. If we do not support breeders, in Mauritius and in Rodrigue, we will no longer have breeders in this country. Ce sont des laissés pour compte, but no more. So therefore, when we are in this context,
please, Honourable, just slow. Let's listen to you, Minister.
When we are in this context, I have almost done, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I don't want to say more. The context has been set. We have had for 2 consecutive years une contraction. If my memory serves me right, it was 7% and then 6% contraction in 2 consecutive years. And if we do not work together as a nation to rebuild our economy, to reboot our economy, we will all be in difficulty together as a nation. This is why we need to come together, stop the blame game. My learned friend, Honorable Mohammed, said, put country first. Yes, we should, and we should work together to make this budget a reality. We should all work together, and on this side of the house, we will leave no stone unturned. We will work day and night à la réalisation des mesures annoncées dans le budget. Et je remercie mon collègue le ministre des Finances pour ce budget. J'en ai fini. Merci, Monsieur le Vice-président.